They took everything, my rank, my name, even my reflection. But they couldn't take the one thing they didn't understand: why humans kept fighting even when there was nothing left to win. The cells smelled like iron and cold ash. The walls were slick with condensation from the recycled air system, and somewhere in the shadows, a drop of water fell with rhythmic cruelty. Plink, plink, plink. They called it the re-education bay. The Zerati guards believed that by isolating the mind, they could dissolve it. They didn't know that humans had already been experts in isolation. From Arctic expeditions to deep space missions, we had learned long ago how to stay sane inside madness. I was one of the last survivors of the Epsilon front, captured when the orbital bombardments ended. They paraded us like trophies through their capital, their civilians spitting words we didn't understand, though the meaning was clear. They thought they'd broken humanity. Each day, they'd open the cell door and drag one of us out. Some never returned. Others came back whispering prayers in a dozen languages. I stopped counting days when the overhead lights began cycling randomly, a psychological trick to kill our sense of time. But I had something the Zerati didn't expect. A small metal tag. Bent, scorched. It wasn't just identification, it was a memory of who I was. On the back were the words every Terran soldier carried. For Earth, for each other. That phrase became my anchor. When the interrogators screamed, when they demanded the codes for the orbital fleet, I smiled. You wouldn't understand, I'd tell them. And they didn't. Days turned to cycles. They offered me better rations in exchange for betrayal. I refused. They offered freedom. I laughed. Finally, they offered mercy, if I would stand before the Galactic Council and denounce Earth as a war criminal world. Mercy. That word didn't mean the same thing to them as it did to us. I told them mercy wasn't something you were given. It was something you earned. The guard who struck me for that answer didn't understand why I thanked him afterward. Because every hit, every insult, every humiliation reminded me I was still human. Then, one day, the screams stopped. The lights didn't flicker anymore. And the door opened, not to a guard, but to something worse: silence. Outside my cell window, a red light blinked across the alien skyline. Ships. Not Zerati. Not human. Something else. The invasion wasn't over. It was just changing hands. As the alarms blared and the walls trembled, I realized something terrifying. For the first time since my capture, my enemy looked afraid. You can measure the end of an empire by the sound it makes when its soldiers start to run. The Zerati didn't retreat, they fled. The sirens screamed like dying animals. The cell doors along the corridor snapped open one by one, not from mercy, but from malfunction. Sparks showered the floor as gravity pulsed irregularly, throwing prisoners and guards alike into the air in chaotic bursts. I crawled to the threshold and saw what fear looked like on the faces of the conquerors. The once proud Zerati guards, towering reptilian figures with carbon plating on their forearms, were dropping their shock lances and tearing off their insignias. Their translators barked orders in fractured tones. Evacuate! Priority 1! Protect the central core! Something had arrived above the planet, something that terrified them enough to forget their prisoners. Through a viewport at the end of the hall, I saw a burning horizon. A fleet. Dozens of ships descending, glowing with Terran blue thrusters. Earth had come back for us. For the first time since my capture, I smiled. But joy was a fragile thing in a war like this. When the first impact hit, the prison trembled. The lights went black. I could hear the distinct sound of atmospheric shrapnel slicing through metal walls, that hiss, that violent pop, followed by silence. The Zerati were screaming now, not in command, but in panic. I found a fallen guard near the doorway. His breathing gurgled through a punctured throat. Beside him, a plasma rifle still hummed. I picked it up, the weight familiar, almost comforting. Forgive me, I muttered. You'd have done worse to mine. The corridors became a battlefield. Humans in tattered uniforms surged through the smoke, their armor scorched and their eyes hollow, but unbroken. They weren't soldiers anymore, they were survivors. The remnants of Task Force Orion, the same unit I had fought beside before my capture. "Captain Rains?" one of them gasped when he saw me. "We thought you were dead." "Not yet," I said, and the words felt heavy, real. They pulled me to my feet, and for a moment, amidst the chaos, I realized the irony. The prisoners were leading the rescue. Every hallway we cleared, every cell we opened, we found someone who had refused to die quietly. Marines, engineers, medics, some missing limbs, some missing hope, all carrying that same glint in their eyes, defiance. When we reached the outer gate, the truth hit me. The Terran fleet wasn't here to conquer. It was here to end it. The bombardments were precise, surgical. They weren't targeting cities or civilians, only command hubs, weapon depots, slave networks. The humans had come back not for revenge, but for justice. And yet, justice was a complicated thing. Near the control tower, we found the warden, a high-caste Zerati commander, trembling, holding an energy detonator. His voice rasped through the smoke. "You destroyers, you'll burn us all!" He wasn't lying. The detonator would collapse the facility's reactor and take thousands, prisoners and rescuers alike, with it. I stepped forward, plasma rifle trained on his chest. "Lower it," I said quietly. He looked at me with something I'd never seen in his species before, desperation. "You don't understand mercy," he hissed. "No," I said, lowering my weapon. "You don't." He blinked, confused. That's when I closed the distance and wrenched the detonator from his claws. He fell to the floor, sobbing, whispering words in his own tongue, not curses this time, but pleas. For his life. From me. When I looked around, my soldiers stared, waiting for me to finish him. But I couldn't. Not because he didn't deserve it, but because the war had already taken enough of our soul. As I walked past the kneeling warden, I heard him whisper in disbelief. "Why spare me, human?" I didn't answer, because deep down, I wasn't sure anymore if it was mercy, or something far more dangerous. The war was over, or so they told us. But peace has a sound, and it wasn't silence. It was the whisper of ghosts asking if what we'd done still made us human. We left the prison behind as the Terran fleet rained precision strikes across the surface. The Zerati command centers burned like cold stars collapsing under their own cruelty. From orbit, Earth's ships were broadcasting a single signal across every channel. Hostilities concluded. All survivors to stand down. Medical aid extended to all sentient beings. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of identity. We are human, and we do not become monsters to defeat them. Still, part of me wanted to argue. As the ruins of the prison smoldered behind us, I could still hear the screams of those who never made it out, friends, brothers, civilians caught in the crossfire. Mercy felt like a luxury we hadn't earned yet. We were escorted aboard the Terran recovery vessel Arcadia, her hull scorched from atmospheric entry. The medics greeted us with quiet professionalism, no cheers or speeches, just a kind of exhausted reverence. I saw soldiers hugging engineers, scientists holding each other like they might vanish again if they let go. And then came the harder part. The prisoners. Not just human, but Zerati civilians, frightened, starving, and abandoned by their own military. The command ordered us to provide medical treatment, food, and shelter. Some humans protested. They enslaved us. They killed our people. You expect us to feed them? But command insisted. Mercy was our victory. I didn't believe it at first. I was assigned to the infirmary. A young Zerati hatchling lay on the cot, her scales pale blue, her breathing shallow. She couldn't have been more than 10. Her mother had died shielding her from falling debris. When she woke, she stared at me in confusion. "Why, help?" she managed in broken translation. "Because someone has to stop the cycle," I said. She didn't understand the words, but she smiled faintly, a gesture I'd never thought possible for her kind. That moment did something to me. The anger I'd been carrying, the fire that had kept me alive, it didn't vanish. But it softened, reshaped itself into something else. Resolve. Because humanity's greatest weapon wasn't our technology or our tactics. It was our ability to feel compassion even when it hurt to. Later, as I wrote in my diary, I looked out from the viewport. The once proud Zerati capital now floated in silence below us, city scarred but not obliterated. The fleet could have leveled the entire planet. Instead, we left it standing, a monument to restraint. But not everyone agreed. Rumors spread of rogue Terran units, men and women who had lost too much to forgive, executing prisoners, burning facilities that were already empty. They called themselves the Reckoners. Their message was simple: mercy is weakness. I read their transmissions with a clenched jaw. They weren't wrong about the pain. They were wrong about what to do with it. Then came the order that tested everything. The surviving Zerati leadership requested to meet with our command, a plea for terms, reparations, and surrender under Terran oversight. They wanted me there. The prisoner who had once knelt in their re-education bay. My commanding officer hesitated. "You sure you want this, Captain Rains?" "I don't," I said. "But maybe I need it." When I entered that hall, the Zerati leaders stood small and trembling. Their eyes darted to me, recognition and shame mingled in their expressions. Their speaker bowed his head. "You had every right to destroy us," he said quietly. "Why didn't you?" I looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Because if we destroy what we hate, we risk destroying what makes us worth saving." The translator paused, unsure if it had heard correctly. But the silence that followed felt holy. As I left the hall, I received a transmission from orbit, classified urgent. A fleet of unknown origin had just entered the system. And this time, it wasn't Zerati. It wasn't human either. The war might be over. But peace was just beginning its own battle. Peace lasted exactly 22 hours. That's how long it took for the galaxy to notice that Earth had forgiven its enemies, and to mistake mercy for weakness. The unidentified fleet arrived from beyond the Perseus line, 6 massive silhouettes emerging from dark space, hulls shimmering with energy fields no database recognized. They didn't respond to hails, didn't broadcast credentials. They just watched. The Arcadia's bridge filled with tension. Tactical screens lit up with a dozen red alerts. The commander turned to me. "Rains, you've been through hell with these bastards. What's your read?" I stared at the distant ships, silent, still, predatory. "They're not scouting," I said softly. "They're judging." The newcomers called themselves the Ardent Compact, a coalition of ancient powers that had long observed the wars of younger species. Their envoy appeared via hologram, a figure of light and smoke, voice like thunder through glass. "You show mercy to the Zerati," it said, "yet you slaughtered them in battle. You offer peace, but your orbit burns with weapons. Humanity preaches compassion and practices conquest. Tell us, Terran, what are you really?" Every eye on the bridge turned toward me. I realized then why I'd been summoned. The prisoner who had once survived captivity now stood as humanity's witness. I took a breath and let the truth come out raw. "We are contradiction," I said. "We fight like demons and heal like saints. We destroy what threatens us, then rebuild it stronger than before. We forgive not because it's easy, but because someone has to stop the fire from spreading." The hologram tilted its head. "You call that strength?" "No," I said. "I call it being human." For a moment, nothing moved. Then the transmission cut. The alien ships powered down their weapons. Slowly, impossibly, they turned and vanished back into the void. The silence that followed wasn't relief, it was all. Against all logic, all strategy, our greatest defense had been empathy. Weeks passed. The rebuilding began. Terran med teams worked alongside Zerati engineers, restoring power grids, purifying water, saving the very planet that had once enslaved us. And for the first time, the Zerati began to understand. Their children learned Terran standard. Their leaders visited our memorials and bowed in silence. They called the event a lesson of Earth, the day an enemy showed them mercy when no one else would. I stayed behind on their world, serving as liaison, historian, and in a way, penitent. The nightmares didn't stop, The screams, the cold walls of my cell, the weight of choices made and unmade. But the child I'd saved, the blue-scaled hatchling, visited often. She brought me a drawing once, 2 hands, 1 human, 1 Zerati, reaching toward a rising sun. Together, she said in her small voice. That word was heavier than any metal. In my final diary entry I wrote, "The galaxy will always mistake mercy for weakness, until the day it sees what mercy can build that vengeance never could. We fought to survive. Now we live to prove that survival means more than victory." And somewhere in the quiet dark between stars, I hope the next warlord who thinks humans are easy prey remembers this. We are the species that forgave our enemies, and terrified the galaxy by doing it.